Good morning.
Good morning.
Feels good to be back, and I appreciate Kyle and David for taking up the pulpit the last 2 Sundays that I was gone. I'm sure they enjoyed it and were anxious to do it also. So I appreciate them, and I also appreciate everybody's cards and sympathies for the passing of Courtney's grandma and letting us go and mourn her death and get some closure there also. Feels like it's been forever also since I've preached here, since I've been gone like 2 Sundays in a row. And for some reason, it feels more like it's been like a month or like 2 months instead of just 2 Sundays. And because of that, we only get 1 Sunday to spend in the book of Exodus this month. And I don't know if that's good for you or bad for you, but either way, open up your Bible to Exodus chapter 17. This is a continuation, as you know, of the complaining, the grumbling, the mumbling that goes on in the wilderness from Israel to God, right? And I wish that we could just learn this lesson really quickly, like maybe in like 1 or 2 chapters of, God's going to provide for you, it's going to be okay, and quit whining to God and then wanting to go back from where you came from that God delivered you from. But alas, the lesson is just not learned, And so we find ourselves at another grumble against God, or as Moses defines it, a grumble against him, because they're thirsty. And eventually the way this ends up is God takes Moses to the rock and says, strike the rock and water will come out from it, living water. And the point that I don't want you to make out of all of this is that we are not allowed to ask God for necessities. The point that we're not supposed to learn here is God doesn't know your problems. God doesn't care about you, and so don't you dare even ask or anything like that. That's not at all what's going on here. Rather, if you were reading, you probably picked up on like the manipulation that's going on here in trying to get God, or rather get Moses, to give them exactly what they want right now, and they've almost completely forgotten God and have gone directly to Moses. And they use this manipulating phrase that maybe it's been used on you before. Is God with us or not? Or maybe the way it was used with you is, if you love me, you would do this for me. Or, if you care about me, you would do this. Or, if you truly believed in God, then God would do this for me. And this is kind of, I don't know, somewhat agnostic, but overall it's really just manipulating talk, right? You ever been in a situation where somebody tries to guilt you into doing something for them that, even if you did it, it doesn't really prove your love, you're just giving them what they want? You been in that situation? It's like getting taken advantage of all over, right? And yet this is kind of the attitude, not even kind of, this is the attitude that the people are taking to Moses. And therefore also taking it to God. And I think that there's kind of a barrier, a mistrust that's being placed in Moses that maybe Israel doesn't realize, but Moses recognizes it. And so there's kind of a person, a place, a thing barrier between people and God. And you see that here with the Israelites. And there's also this extortion and this manipulation that's going on where they're trying to get what they want through bad means. And then there's also kind of this there's this consistent image throughout the whole text between sticks, stones, and water, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. It's fascinating, and I'm really excited to get to point 3, but we have to start from the beginning here and look at where the trust of Israel is. You remember in Exodus chapter 14, verse 31, after the crossing of the Red Sea, and after in Exodus 14:14, when Moses said, don't worry, all you need to do is hold your peace. God is going to deliver you from the Egyptians. You just need to watch and see. Watch and see. And after watching and seeing God work out salvation for them, in verse 31 of Exodus 14, it says the people believed in the Lord and they believed in his servant Moses. What they had seen had compelled them to believe in God and in Moses at that moment. It was truly like their sight had given them faith. Even after all of the other wonders and judgments they had experienced, you think that would be enough for them to think that God could give them water or what they needed in this moment. But they don't even ask God for water. They don't ask God for anything. They just move right to complaining, and they go directly to Moses, actually. Verse 2 of Exodus 17 says this, therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me, and why do you test the Lord?" And you kind of see that they're thinking, "Moses, this is your fault. We're here. Moses, you've led us this way." Actually, later on, they'll say, "You led us into the wilderness to die. That was you, Moses, us and our wives and our children and all our livestock. Moses, you have brought us into this problem. Moses, we have seen you do solutions in the past. Moses, you're the leader here. So Moses, you give us water to drink." But have they completely forgotten that there is a God that has given Moses the authority to do what he is doing? Have they forgotten that God has been the one that has rescued them from Egypt and has also given them water to drink the first time and food to eat before this and can surely give them water to drink now? Have they completely forgotten that and instead want to put Moses in the position of you answer to us and we make our requests to you, Moses? It's almost like their trust is only in Moses. And this is not a foreign concept to people having trust in things that are not God, right? You see this inside and outside of the church, I believe. Where is anybody's trust in the world, right? Everybody is hoping for something, whether their trust relies on the things that they can accumulate, right? Whether the trust is fully built on work, whether trust is built on iconic people, and that is what their whole life is wrapped around. Whether their trust is in institutions and organizations and they build their whole life to serve these things and say, "Give me everything that I need." See, people put their trust in just about anything and completely forget that there is a God that is above all things, that provides all things. And I think people even make this mistake. It's possible to make this mistake even inside the church, right? We would put our trust maybe into the preacher and maybe only have a relationship through God through a preacher instead of one directly with God. Maybe we would have the faith of our parents, but our faith is only built on our parents and not directly with God, and our faith hasn't become our own between us and God, right? Or maybe I can tell it this way, besides people will trust in a thing, and we'll see this play out where people will worship a bronze serpent that God had given them. God had given them to be saved, and they worship the idol of the bronze instead of the God that made that way. I was watching a show. It was, believe it or not, it was a documentary. But this was like a long time ago. I want to say I was like maybe 14 or something, somewhere around that age. And it was one of those documentaries where they were doing they're going into the forbidden parts of the museums and the underground parts of the pyramids that nobody's allowed to go into, and they're acting like they're sneaking in. It was one of those shows. And yeah, kind of like fake Indiana Jones documentary. And this guy that was doing the show was like, "We're going to find the staff of Moses. We're going to find the staff of Moses. And what I want to see when we get this unique staff of Moses is how do we control water with this staff that has power over the water?" I'm thinking, this is absolutely ridiculous. What kind of cable TV is this? Like, even I can put together that it's not the staff by itself that has power over the water, like it's a wizard staff in a video game or something like that. And besides that, how would you even know that that was the staff of Moses? And besides that, what about all the times in the Bible where it says this was the staff of God that Moses took up, right? Like, God had given this staff to do these things to Moses and gave him the authority and the ability to do these things, right? It all starts with God, but this guy, television, sure, whatever it is, had idolized this staff, this mysterious staff and its power, and had completely forgotten about the God and the whole story and the idea of relationship between God and man. That all had to be cast away. And it's also kind of like what Mike Wilson was talking about in his gospel meeting, that if we found the very first handwritten documents of the New Testament, would we idolize those and forget the God? You know. And so humans naturally, whether it's on TV or maybe it's even just ourselves, sometimes we set up barriers, idols, things that are between us and God, and we forget that we have the direct access to the relationship with the one. We have the one that gives us life. We have the one that gives us direction. We have the one that gives us provision. Where is our trust? I hope that our trust is directly with the one that brings forth water of life. Jesus says it himself. You should be familiar with this verse. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. If anybody wants to argue that there's another way to get to heaven without Jesus, or there are multiple ways to get to heaven without Jesus Christ, this will be incredibly offensive. But this is the truth of the matter, that Jesus Christ is the only one between us and God. And God calls us to him through Jesus Christ. And then he says at the end of the Bible, Revelation 21:6 says this, and he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give from the spring of water of life without payment. There's this beautiful scene that's going on in Revelation 21. And God says, I give life. I give water for life. It all starts and ends with me. And the only way to get to me is through my Son, Jesus Christ. And so why don't we remove every barrier between us and God? Why don't we remove everything that we want to substitute Jesus Christ with and have a direct, loving, impactful, life-giving relationship with a God that wants us? I hope that's exactly what we have and what we pursue. As Israel teaches us, that's not what they did, and you see how this situation deteriorates when they almost create Moses as the one that they need to speak and receive everything from and answer to. And Moses calls it out. Verse 2 again, therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. And Moses said to them, why do you quarrel with me, and why do you test the Lord? But the people thirsted for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? And so Moses cried to the Lord and said, what shall I do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me. And the Lord said to Moses, pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders in Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go, and behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb. And you shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massah and Meribah, because of the quarreling of the people of Israel, because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Is God still with us, or has God abandoned us? Because we're not seeing what we want to see from God, so he must not be here, right? We're not getting what we want or what we think we need. And Moses, you're not giving us what we are telling you to give us right here in this moment. So is God even here? Is God even truly with us? And this is what I was saying before, the popular question that maybe people present to us. Prove God to me in my way that I will accept. Or maybe this is also the question of people saying, if God really loved me, then why did he put me in a difficult situation? Or making the claim, if God was so powerful, then why does he allow things that I don't like? Or if God truly loved me, then why does he not approve of the things that I want to do? If God loved me, then he would allow whatever I want and whatever I feel is right. You see how this testing goes on? This is the same way that Israel is trying to test God. God, if you're actually with us, God, if you're actually with Moses, if you're actually from God, then you will give us something to drink right now. Does the phrase, if you are with God, sound familiar from another passage? Because it should call you to think of the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness, where Satan meets Jesus and says, if you're the Son of God, Jesus, turn these stones to bread. Prove it to me, prove it to you, prove it to God. Jesus, if you're truly the Son of God, then throw yourself off, and God's not going to let you get hurt. He'll send his angels to catch you. Prove it, Jesus. And what Jesus tells what Jesus tells Satan is a situation that Moses experienced that's written in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 16. You shall not test the Lord your God. You see, Deuteronomy 6:16 was written to memorialize Exodus 17 of not testing God, as you did in this situation. And that's what Jesus tells Satan. You shall not test the Lord your God, as some others have already done. And yet, you have the testing of God between Israel. They don't want the proof. They just want what they want immediately. And even when they demand proof of Moses, Moses doesn't give it to them immediately. You see, they're calling out to Moses, saying, give us something to drink, and all of this, is God with us or is he not? And yet Moses doesn't do any sort of action to meet their demands immediately. He doesn't move without God's permission, is maybe the best way to say that. He doesn't do anything like try to provide for them water of any way that he could possibly do it. Actually, what he says is, God, the situation is desperate, whether he's being dramatic or not. And Lord, they're about to stone me to death. They think they're going to die, so they're going to kill me. They want waters of life, and so they're going to stone me if they don't get it. And it's incredible how many people that are trying to do God's will end up being threatened by stoning. It's incredible how many leaders that are godly might face sudden death from the people that they're trying to lead. This happened with even David, King David, in 1 Samuel 10, 1-6, after kind of a difficult situation where the families of his leaders have been taken advantage of. They're mad at David for that happening while they were away fighting battles, and they're going to stone David. Jesus in John chapter 10, 31-32 was almost stoned for saying, I am the Son of God. Stephen, the first martyr, was stoned to death by presenting Jesus Christ, and actually also talking about how rebellious and stiff-necked the Israelites have always been. It's incredible how many people that are following God so closely nearly die or do die by doing what God wants, by teaching about God. And yet, instead of being stoned, God leads Moses to a stone. He brings him to the rock. He says, that's where I'm going to meet you, this rock. And you're going to take that staff that was in your hand, and you're going to strike this rock. Back to the stick, right? Back to the staff here. And what the text points out is that this is the same staff that you struck the Nile with. So in the same way that I can poison the water, I can give water. The same way that I use the staff here, I can use it in any sort of situation that I command you to use it. And the relationship between water and rocks and stones is consistent throughout the entire Bible. But maybe I'll start with this also. Moses struck this rock and water flowed out and it gave life. In Genesis chapter 2, we're going all the way back to the beginning. The Garden of Eden, pure as it was, a river flows out of Eden and it divides into 4 rivers that provides life to 4 different known areas, right? Flowing water started as something that was life-giving and wonderful and pure. Exodus chapter 17, verse 6, we find ourselves here where a rock is struck and it provides water, living water for people that are in this desperate situation. But there's also kind of this idea where danger and condemnation had to come before giving life, and this rock had to be hit for it to happen. Exodus chapter 7, verse 20, Moses strikes the Nile, and you see this division between who God is with and who God is against. The first sign that Moses did in using the staff to strike water was, God is against Egypt, and I am for my people. Joshua chapter 1, well, really 1-5, Israelites crossed the Jordan River, and this was a new generation. This was a new time, new leadership. Joshua is the leader. on this new campaign. And so this water was a division between the old way and the new generation. John chapter 4, Jesus offers living water to a Samaritan woman and is almost closing the gap, closing the division between Samaritans and Jerusalemites, and pointing forward to this union that will happen as one that gives living water, constantly refreshing water. John chapter 6, Jesus says, I am the bread of life, and whoever comes to me shall never hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. And so Jesus is the living water that provides life and creates union between us and God the Father. John chapter 7, verse 38, Jesus is the dividing river between those that believe he is the Christ and those that hate him and want to kill him. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 20 through 21, we get to knock out two here, where we get Noah and we get baptism, where the water that Noah had his boat floating upon was a separation between those that were judged and condemned and those that were saved. And so is baptism, this division between those that want to stay on the side of condemnation and those that want to be saved and made whole with God. Revelation chapter 22, the river of life flows from the throne of God and down the middle of the street of the city, and on either side of it is the tree of life. See, so there's this consistent relationship between water and life. And in the garden, and in this heavenly scene in Revelation chapter 22, all that remains is water and life. It all starts and ends with God. And yet here, we have something that's pointing to the future with a staff that strikes a rock and brings forth water that gives life to these people. When God says strike the rock, Moses, this is not like a little boop on the rock. This is like striking it to kill it. Probably what he wanted to do to the Israelites, but he did it to a rock instead. And it points forward to the fact that Jesus was the one that was struck and was prophesied of being struck. Isaiah 53:10, it was the will of the Lord to crush his son. He was the rock that was struck and provides life for us. So pointing forward to that. And so instead of us being struck by God as we truly deserve as sinners, Jesus, our rock, was struck to provide life for us. We could summarize all of this by saying God has always provided and will always provide living, refreshing water for people, and Jesus is that living and flowing water. And if you believe that Jesus was struck to give you life, he bids you to come to him, to believe on him, to be in him, to be baptized in water for him, to be in the eternal throne where it's never dry. You see, God didn't need to be tested. God has always provided relief and provision for his people. But more than that, God doesn't need to prove that he cares about his people over and over and over again. And God doesn't need to prove to us or anyone else over and over and over again that he cares and loves for us. That's not a demand that we can make to God, because he has already proved it in the greatest way possible by sending his son, Jesus Christ, to be struck and killed and save us. It's already been done. And nothing could be greater than that. And so we can't present, no one can present to God, prove to me that you love me. However, maybe it's us that need the testing. John chapter 14, verse 15. If you love me, Jesus says. 1 John chapter 5, verse 2 through 3. Same author, but coming with instruction here. If we say we love him, we'll keep his commandments. Took my bookmark out of that one. 1 John chapter 5, verse 2. By this we know that we love the children of God, and we love God and obey his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. If we love God, we can know this by keeping his commandments. Love God and love one another. You see, God doesn't need to be tested. He's proved his love in the greatest way, eternally. Maybe it's us that need the testing. See, am I truly living a life that loves God? Loving my brother and my sister? Am I truly living a life that says there's no barriers between me and God? I am fully in love with Jesus Christ. There's no excuses to give up following God. There's no substitution for following God. There's no extra demands of God. Only a direct relationship that he wants to have with you. And I hope you take hold of that relationship by being baptized into Jesus Christ and being immersed into water to find eternal life. May we always present ourselves as people that love God. And may you always believe in God's love for us. If there's anything I can do for you, you can meet me at the back as we stand and sing this song. There's a fountain free, number 2.